You sabotage it again. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone else would notice. You just pulled back at the exact moment things started feeling real. Maybe you picked a fight about something small. Maybe you went cold without explanation. Maybe you simply convinced yourself they were going to leave anyway. So you left first. And the worst part is you knew you were doing it somewhere underneath the noise of justifying it. And you did it anyway. That's not weakness. That's not you being difficult or broken or incapable of love. That's a pattern. One that was written into you long before this relationship, this job, this friendship, long before you were old enough to understand what was being written. And the question that most people never think to ask isn't, why do I keep doing this? The real question is, what is this pattern protecting you from? Because it is protecting you. That's the part that will change everything once you understand it. Before we go further, if something in those first few words landed somewhere familiar, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. This channel exists for people who are willing to look at the parts of themselves that are hardest to look at. If that's you, stay. You deserve to understand why you move through the world the way you do. In the 1980s, psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk began documenting something that the clinical world had been quietly observing for years, but rarely named plainly. The body keeps the score, not a metaphor, a literal neurological reality, that unprocessed emotional experiences don't disappear, they get stored in the nervous system, in behavioral patterns, in the automatic responses we have to situations that remind us, even faintly, of the moments that first shaped us. His work and the decades of research it helped open up confirmed what many people have felt but couldn't articulate. You are not acting from who you are now. Much of the time, you are acting from who you had to be then. But here's the question this video is going to answer, and I need you to sit with it before we get there. If these patterns are old survival strategies, why do they feel so much like self-destruction? Why does the thing your nervous system does to protect you also keep costing you everything you actually want? There was a woman, documented in clinical literature under the name Elena, who came into therapy in her late 30s after her third long-term relationship had ended in what she described as the same collapse. Each relationship, she said, had started the same way, intense, consuming. She would feel, for the first time in a long time, like she had finally found someone who understood her. She would give everything. She was present, attentive, generous. Her partners consistently said in the early months that they had never felt so seen by anyone. And then, around the 6-month mark, something would shift. It wasn't dramatic. No single event triggered it. But Elena would begin to feel, slowly and then all at once, that something was wrong. She couldn't name it. Her partner hadn't changed. The relationship was, by most measurements, stable. But she would begin to feel an almost unbearable restlessness, an urge to test them, to see if they would stay if she became harder to love. She started picking fights she didn't care about. She started withdrawing without explanation and watching, with a kind of cold attachment that frightened even her, to see how they responded. When they pulled toward her, she felt suffocated. When they gave her space, she felt abandoned. There was no correct response. She had set up a situation where love, no matter what shape it arrived in, could not reach her. All 3 relationships ended when her partners, exhausted and confused, eventually stopped trying. Elena sat across from her therapist after the third ending and said something she'd never said out loud before. I think I do this on purpose. I just don't know why. That's where we're going. The pattern Elena was living is not unique to her. It has a name, anxious avoidance cycling, and it sits at the intersection of 2 attachment styles that, when combined in one person, create a nearly inescapable internal conflict. But the name matters less than the mechanism, so let's talk about what's actually happening. When you experience early environments where love was inconsistent, where the people who were supposed to be safe were sometimes safe and sometimes not, where care came with conditions or unpredictability, your nervous system learns something specific. It learns that closeness is dangerous, not intellectually, not as a belief you could argue yourself out of, as a physical, autonomic response, a warning system. B-roll, child reaching for adult who turns away, then turns back, showing inconsistency. And here's the thing about warning systems. They don't turn off just because the danger is gone. They get recalibrated over time, but they don't reset. So you grow up, you leave the environment that shaped them, you build a life that looks nothing like what you came from, and the warning system is still running, still scanning, still doing the job it was built to do, even when the job is no longer necessary. This is why your hidden emotions so often control your visible actions. You're not acting from what you consciously want. You're acting from what your nervous system has been trained to expect. And what it expects in moments of real intimacy is eventual abandonment. So it moves to protect you from that before it happens. But here's what most people never realize. The protection looks like sabotage from the outside. And over time, it starts to look like sabotage from the inside too. You start to believe this is just who you are. Someone who pushes people away. Someone who can't sustain closeness. Someone fundamentally unsuited to the things they want most. Bureau. Person sitting alone at a table that was clearly set for two. That belief is the second layer of the wound, and it's often heavier than the first. The second beat of this mechanism involves self-sabotage specifically, because it deserves its own examination. Self-sabotage is not irrational. It is, in the vocabulary of the nervous system, deeply rational. If you have been conditioned to associate success, closeness, visibility, or achievement with subsequent loss or punishment, if good things in your past were reliably followed by something painful, then your system learns to manage the gap, to reduce the height from which you might fall, to make sure you are never surprised by loss again by manufacturing it on your own terms. Bureau. Hand pushing away something precious, close up. Self-sabotage is rooted in fear and past conditioning, but it presents as apathy, carelessness, self-destruction. It presents as the person who quits just before the finish line, who picks the fight just before the anniversary, who leaks information that ends the opportunity just as it was becoming real. From the outside, this looks like someone who doesn't want good things. From the inside, it feels like a compulsion you can't explain. And here is where it gets harder. Not all what you call attachment is love. Some of it, and this takes real honesty to look at, is dependency, emotional dependency. The experience of needing someone not because they bring genuine connection and joy into your life, but because their presence regulates something in your nervous system that you haven't yet learned to regulate yourself. When they're present, the anxiety quiets. When they're absent, it spikes. And over time, you mistake the relief of their presence for love. Bureau. Two hands tightly gripped, not tender, tense. This creates relationships that feel essential but are often destabilizing because you're not relating to the person. You're relating to what they do to your nervous system. And when that stops working, when they become a person with needs and limits rather than a source of regulation, the relationship becomes a site of escalating distress. This is a part no one talks about. You can genuinely love someone and still be using them in this way. Both things are true, and understanding that distinction is not about shame. It's about being honest about what you're actually looking for when you reach for another person. You've done this. I've done this. And if you're watching this video, there's a reasonable chance you felt it from the other side too, been the person someone else was using to regulate, and felt the strange confusion of being needed intensely and yet never quite seen. Think about the last time you felt an overwhelming urge to check your phone after a conversation that went slightly off. Not because anything was said that was alarming, but because something in the tone, something in the timing of a response, some barely perceptible signal, activated something in your chest. And you couldn't work, couldn't think, couldn't let it go until you had confirmation that everything was fine. That's your trigger speaking. And triggers don't reveal weakness. They reveal where the wound is. Or think about the time you were offered something genuinely good, a promotion, a relationship, a friendship, and instead of allowing yourself to want it cleanly, you immediately began cataloging everything that could go wrong. You built the case against it before it had a chance. Not because the opportunity was bad, because wanting something that much felt unsafe. That's the conditioning speaking. Not you, a version of you, from a time when wanting things that much and not getting them was the sharpest kind of pain. This is not a character flaw. This is what protection looked like for a version of you that didn't have any other tools. I want to ask you something, because I genuinely want to know, what is the one pattern in your life, the one you keep returning to, that you've never been able to fully explain, even to yourself. The behavior you catch yourself in and think, why do I keep doing this? You can leave your answer in the comments. I read them all, and more people than you'd expect are carrying the exact same thing in silence. Here's where I have to be honest with you, because this video would be dishonest if I let you leave with the impression that understanding all of this is a solution. It's not. This is the part of the conversation that the wellness space almost always skips, because it doesn't feel good to say, and it doesn't generate the kind of engagement that "you are healed now" content generates. But it's the truth, and you came here for the truth. Awareness of your dark side, of your patterns, your triggers, your conditioned responses, is necessary. It is the beginning, but it is not the same as being free of them. The research on this is consistent, and once you look at it directly, a little humbling. A landmark study by neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux found that fear memories, the kind laid down in the amygdala during early or repeated stressful experiences, are remarkably resistant to erasure. You don't delete them. You build alternative pathways around them through new experiences that are repeated enough and safe enough to gradually teach your nervous system a different expectation. This is slow. It is nonlinear. It often feels like it isn't working, right up until it does. What this means in practice is that you can understand, intellectually, exactly why you pull away when someone gets close. You can trace it. You can name the original experience. You can explain it to a therapist in precise and articulate language. And the next time someone you love reaches toward you in a moment of real intimacy, your body can still flood with the old signal, still pull toward the old pattern, still reach for the exit. Knowing why does not stop the body from doing what it learned to do. Not immediately, not automatically, not without the kind of repeated, real-world experience of tolerating closeness, of choosing to stay in a room when every trained response says leave, that gradually, neurologically, rewrites the expectation. Birol, person on the edge of walking out a door, hand on the frame, pausing. This is why people can manipulate you without you noticing. Because manipulation, especially the kind that happens in close relationships, works by activating these existing patterns. It finds the wound and applies pressure. And your system responds before your conscious mind has processed what's happening. The reaction feels like yours. It is yours, but it was invited by something external that knew exactly where to push. Awareness gives you a pause, a half second of observation before the automatic response completes. That pause is everything, and it is also much less than you hoped for when you started this journey. The gap between knowing what you're doing and not doing it anymore is where most of the real work lives. And that gap is measured not in insights, but in repetitions, in moments, in choosing, again and again, to act from who you want to be rather than what you were conditioned to expect. That is harder than it sounds. Not because you're weak, because the conditioning is old, and old things have deep roots. Birol, a tree, roots visible above ground, persistent and deep. The reframe I want to leave you with is this. You are not fighting yourself. You are not at war with your darker patterns. You are, slowly and with whatever tools you can gather, teaching a very old part of yourself that the danger prepared for is not here anymore. That is not a battle. It's a conversation. And conversations take time. Here's what the darker question in this video open with actually asks, when you sit with it properly. If these patterns were always protective, what are they protecting you from now, not in the past? Now, because the honest answer, for most people, is nothing that requires this level of defense. The threat that trained the pattern is gone. What remains is the pattern itself, running on old data, defending against a danger that hasn't existed for years, costing you things in the present to protect you from something in the past. You are not toxic. You are defended. And the work, slow, nonlinear, unglamorous as it is a gradual process of deciding that you are safe enough now to lower some of those defenses, not all at once, not without evidence, but incrementally with people who have earned enough trust to make it reasonable. Understanding psychology gives you something real, not control of a pattern, but visibility into it. And visibility is the beginning of choice, not the end of the struggle. The beginning of it. Carry that with you. Thank you for staying with this one. I know this kind of content isn't easy to sit with. It asks something of you that a lot of content doesn't. If this video found something real in you, share it with one person in your life who keeps repeating a pattern they can't explain. Not to fix them, just because sometimes people need to know that what they're carrying has a name. If you're not subscribed yet, this channel is here for exactly these conversations. The ones most people avoid because they're too honest, too slow, too close to the bone. And if what we talked about today is real, if your patterns are rooted in something older than you've been able to see clearly, then there's a question worth sitting with before next time. Where did the original wound come from? Not the pattern. The thing underneath the pattern. The moment before you learn to protect yourself. What does that look like? And is it still running the show? Next video.